rap shop movement out in Boston and Peabody and Quincy and all surrounding Boston areas, they all, they go hard. And everybody really, in the Mass area seems to really support them. And in Worcester too, I mean, a lot of people are putting in work. This is a city with a lot of talent, man. And I hate to single out Worcester instead of Central Mass, but there's a lot of talent out here. And it's basically a gold mine for anybody who's looking to represent artists. You got boom bap, you got, club shit, you got trap tracks, you got, horrorcore, you got all kinds of different styles.
You got the whole variety. And I know you mentioned Rec Shop, man. I just have a quick question, just out of curiosity. You probably heard about Mass Rhymes. How do you feel about that movement?
Well, man, honestly, I don't know enough about that whole particular situation to drop any science on it. But, I mean, it seems to me as though it was two friends that started, and they started something together and didn't really see eye to eye, and they kind of just branched off to do their own separate things, which goes to a perfect example of what I was just saying of A wants to work with B don't like C, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly, yeah.
So it puts you in somewhat of a funny predicament of where you stand in the whole entire scenario, but I just try to keep it based on the music as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, man, that's keeping 100, that's keeping it real, I'm sure a lot of real MCs appreciate that. But, so back in 2011, you released The Divine Intervention, and was that your first official release? I know you can download it on Bandcamp.
Oh, yeah, that was my first LP. The first release I ever put out actually was the Slums EP, and that was also that was like a remix EP of the Slums track I did for the 36 Chamber School MCing competition. And that was kind of more based on the competition and more to show people what I was bringing to the table. But as far as a cohesive piece of work on like an album that I actually put a lot of time and effort to, yeah, Divine Intervention was definitely my first entry into the catalog.
Exactly. And what was the first project called again?
The EP was called the Slums EP, and that's based off of the Slums tune, which is you can check that out on YouTube. And that was actually part of my it was a submission for the 36 Chamber School MCing competition by Wu Management.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about that. I wasn't too sure exactly what it was all about. I knew that you were trying to do something for Wu-Tang.
More or less what they were doing was at that point in time they were searching throughout the country looking for a group of artists that could properly represent somewhat of a newer breed and a new generation of like a Wu-ish kind of vibe. So basically like the students, basically. It would be like the students of Wu, all the cats that pretty much pledge allegiance and really wanted to represent it. A lot of misconstruing went into it. A lot of people got the impression that it was going to be like a new Wu-Tang Clan, which is damn near impossible, or it was going to be anything closely related. A lot of people thought that it was going to be like a new Wu, and people were trying to say, oh, this is the new Wu-Tang and like that, but obviously that's damn near impossible. It was more so, just to kind of just like the new school of artists that grew up off of that. So you'd be able to see, just exactly how you were telling me earlier. You can tell that I listen to certain artists through my style. It would be the same thing to them.
Exactly.
Do something fresh and new, but at the same time, you would still hear the core. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly where you're coming from. Just younger artists showing their inspirations within their music and, just, paying dues to, the guys that laid it out before them.
And that competition actually did a whole lot for a lot of artists. You know what I mean? On some certain levels, it helped people take things a lot more seriously and help them figure out which ways to go about things and treating it not only as a culture but more like a business. And at the same time, it did a lot for people's exposure.
Oh, I believe it, man. I believe it. Would you say it helped you as an MC as well?
As an MC, I mean, all around, all together. In a certain sense, it worked against me personally a little bit because I started I started putting myself into whereas normally I would just write something and then I would, I would feel how I felt about it. Through that, it would be like I would run myself through a much tougher screening process. So say, for instance, I was going to be on one of the mixtapes that they had coming out. When I was writing my verses, it's something that I would normally write and be like, wow, that's dope. I would look over it like a million times and be like, oh, this is going to be out on a Wu project? Like, I got to have this crisp and have to go over everything. But, I mean, even as far as exposure, a lot of people that might have not taken me seriously prior to that definitely, looked at me in a different light after that. But that was a double-edged sword in its own, because you have people that might have not paid attention to you, but then as soon as the rumor mill started going and people are like, oh yeah, you're doing this with Wu-Tang, Wu-Tang, and all this other stuff, then people will actually start to pay attention to you or treat you differently, but in their reality, it's like I'm the same exact artist that I was prior to that. But as far as what they did a whole lot for me. They really helped mold me more business-wise, and they really helped really helped to get me a lot more exposure, and I appreciate that. A lot of those brothers I'm still real close to today.
That's awesome, man. That's for real. People start hearing about the word and it starts spreading like a forest fire. Just doing for something like that, being part of a big project, that Wu-Tang was putting out. And eventually, man, you went into releasing Divine Intervention, and then you released Spliff Notes in March of 2013, which I want to touch about just real quick because it has some of the EDM production within Spliff Notes. How would you say is the EDM scene in Worcester, and who were some of the producers that you worked with for it? And would you say that certain substance helped enhance the certain aspects of the EDM music scene?
For the Spliff Notes?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard to say. The torch has kind of been passed over here to a newer crowd. Once again, going back to the DJ thing, when I was coming up, there was the first gig I ever got, the first weekly I ever had was at the Marquee, which is now the Venue, and it used to be an event called Live and Direct. Mm-hmm. It was all breaks and all jungle and stuff like that. And those are like the OGs, and nowadays the scene out here is kind of, there's a ton of bass music going on out here. There's multiple clubs that got stuff popping off. Yeah. I'm not really sure if Spliff Notes had too much of an impact on the Worcester heads, to be honest, as far as the electronic music is concerned out here. But I did a lot of work with Diode, who's probably my favorite Worcester drum and bass producer out here, and he's a beast. And a lot of the work that we did together was, has definitely reached a lot of heads out here. Seeing out here is definitely, I would say maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, it was kind of like on a real big slump. And then we started doing Bass Embassy, and then we did the Foundations thing for a while, and then we had Electric Tuesdays out here, and it really started to pop off, and now it's just like everywhere you turn, there's a different weekly going on.
All right, I hear that, because I'm...
Question? Like...
No, that was perfect, man. I was just wondering about the scene. I know I dropped quite a few questions on that one, because I really...
Basically, there's a lot of younger, really a lot of younger kids, and this probably goes the same for everywhere, because a lot of the bass music, whether it's, like dubstep, house, jungle, psytrance, whatever it is, usually the people that tend to flock to that, besides their musical taste, like culturally, are usually outcasts, or people that like haven't really found their like fame or whatever. So you find a lot of kids now that not really sure, there's not really too many promising musical directions for them to go to, and I think that has a lot to do with grasping them and pulling them in. Another thing too is you could be, say somebody listens to jungle, you could be standing next to a guy who looks like he should be teaching, a biology class, and next to a dude that, looks like he just pushed 3 pounds of trees. You know what I mean? Basically, it's anybody and everybody. You know what I mean? It's a very open culture to no matter how you dress or how you look or how you talk or how you act. It's not really, in certain, hip hop, it might be, tighter constraints on like, what's normal. Whereas with this, it's a completely different.
More guidelines. I definitely feel that. But this past Independence Day, man, July 4th, you released your album 3D, which has 16 new tracks and goes back to more of that rugged, classic East Coast sounding underground hip hop. What would you say was your main idea behind 3D, and how would you say you structured your lyrics to make, maybe in general, Elijah Divine song?
Well, as far as 3D, I'll break it down like this. 3D actually stands for the three deceptions. So the three deceptions of hip-hop were the tough guy. I mean, if you listen to the title track, it breaks down into the tough guy, it breaks down into the drug dealer, and it breaks down into the cat that thinks he's in the mafia. Super organized crime. Really, the way I was looking at it was I wanted to come out with like what would be the equivalent of like a summer blockbuster. And I really put a lot of time and effort into that album, and what I did, I noticed if you listen to Divine Intervention and then listen to Split Notes and listen to 3D, you'll see them progressively get more cohesive. Like Divine Intervention is kind of just like dope tunes that you can tell I put a lot of thought into it, but they don't flow together as well as...
Yeah, true that. No.
So when you get into 3D, it kind of just like reels straight through, almost like a movie. And a lot of basically, what I had did with that album was the main review that I kept getting from people and the main criticism that I was receiving was that they